Okay, the Russians are changing their textbook to provide a more coherent narrative about Ukraine and why they're in Ukraine to speak to the younger generation in order to prepare them for Putin's long war. As a professor, this one made me really, really mad. Russia's latest effort to sway young minds, high school textbooks praising the conflict in Ukraine. Okay, so Russia is ramping up its efforts to ensure even its youngest citizens fall in line with the official narrative. RT and TV shows and those kind of things, that's not enough. And they dominate TV shows. Even non-news related TV shows, they'll slip in things about, the war in Ukraine, or the best onions come from Crimea, or those kind of things. I mean, it's pretty amazing what they do. The country's Ministry of Education this week unveiled its new history textbooks with sections about what it calls the special military operation in Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea, and Western sanctions. And it's all going to be pro-Russian positions on each of these things. The goal is to indoctrinate school children. Okay, and when we say indoctrinate, we don't mean educate. Those are two very different things. If I just plant in your mind some thought about something and don't think about this, just accept this, that is indoctrination. If I'm trying to teach you to critically think, I want you to look at this side and then look at that side and then compare the difference. You might still be saying that this side is correct and here's why, but let's examine the other side and fully examine the other side, not create a straw man on the other side, but actually try to understand what's going on the other side and then compare notes. Okay, Putin has always maintained that Moscow's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine is an effort to liberate the country from Nazi regime and Western influence. Yeah, it's a Nazi regime, and he's been saying that for a long time. Nazi, Nazi, Nazi. It's not Nazi. It's not Z. N-O-T-Z. We don't want Russians in here. That's what the Ukrainians are saying. Okay. Moscow's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine is an effort to liberate. It's not an effort to liberate. It's an effort to capture. They didn't liberate. So in this world, they have returned these lands back to historical Russia, and that's the kind of picture that they're painting. There's no such thing as independent Ukraine, and he's made that very clear that this is not. It's a fictional country. Russia and Ukrainians are one people. It's really one nation. The little brothers just kind of gone off the reservation, but we're going to return them to historic Russia. The new textbook endorsed this narrative. They call Ukraine an ultra-nationalist state where all dissent is persecuted and everything Russia is declared hostile. Well, it wasn't that way, but as of 2014, you gave us a sense that maybe your intentions toward Ukraine weren't the best. And then in 2022, you made it very clear to the entire world of what you were doing. The authors tell students that when they look for information about Ukraine on the internet, they should remember that there is a, quote, global industry for the production of staged videos and fake photos and videos. So what they're doing in doing that is already predisposing them to be skeptical about free Western media when they're saying something that contradicts the Russian line. So the Russian education minister said that the textbooks include selections about the reasons for the start of the special military operation, the purpose of the special military operation, denazification, demilitarization, and an entry on the new regions into the Russian Federation. So, and it's all going to be done from that, like reading out of RT. They vowed to update the textbooks after the end of the war as soon as we win. So it'll be interesting to see the updated textbook when they lose. The new textbooks have not appeared out of the blue. They've been working on these for some time, but they got it done in record time. I saw another article that said in like 4 or 5 months they got these complete. And it's, yeah. Okay, there's been an increase in school indoctrination efforts through textbooks, and why not? You really want these people to be indoctrinated so they're much more willing to volunteer or be recruited and not resist and run away like a million Russians did when they first had the call for new enrollment into the military. A rise in pressure on teachers to promote patriotic narrative of Russian history after Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea. So when that first happened, you saw teachers starting to push back, but they started pushing back against those teachers. And so now they're trying to push this particular narrative. This is what the textbook looks like. I don't read Russian, but if you do, it'd be interesting to see what that says exactly. According to the statement by the Education Ministry, the series of lectures is aimed at fostering patriotism, love of service for motherland in children as young as 6. Now, there's nothing wrong in fostering patriotism. The issue is fostering a my country right or wrong. You should love your country. You should love truth, justice, and doing the right things. Truth, justice, and the American way. You'd hope that those 3 things would line up, right? That truth and justice and the American way, that those things would line up. When they don't line up, you should rightly criticize what doesn't line up and try to get it in line. But where they do line up, fostering patriotism in and of itself is not wrong. But it's what you're fostering patriotism in that's the issue. Okay, some lessons feature Russia's past accomplishments, such as its space explorations, but many center around its role as the defender of other countries. Oh my. So while Ukraine's looking at this as an invasion, they're framing it as we're just defending these Russian peoples in Ukraine, and that's the way it's going to be carried. One piece of material claims Russia is a country that respects the freedom and sovereignty of other countries, which is going to be hard for Ukrainians to fathom because they're not exactly respecting the freedom and sovereignty of Ukraine as they're invading, and ask students to give, quote, examples of Russia protecting the sovereignty of other countries. It's really evil the way that they're framing this. Ian Gardner, a historian and author of Z Generation, Into the Heart of Russia's Fascist Youth, said that the education changes are part of a much broader transformation of the national culture in Russia into one that is, quote, hyper-patriotic, hyper-nationalist, hyper-exclusive of minorities and everything that is deemed non-Russian. What's really interesting there is that he's talking about how Russia is becoming hyper-patriotic and hyper-nationalist. Russia is becoming the same thing that it's accusing Ukraine of doing, just Ukraine's not cool with Russia anymore, right? So Russia is accusing Ukraine of becoming hyper-nationalist. You heard that language earlier, but Russia's becoming hyper-nationalist. If it's okay for you to be, why is it not okay for the other? Well, because it's not hyper-nationalist pro-Russia, and that's different. Okay. No critical thinking is allowed. Many countries introduce school children to patriotic ideas and civic values. And that's normal. That's okay. In the U.S., students recite the Pledge of Allegiance in schools and in most states. Now, I know some people will push back against this, but it's really, if you understand and if you've had the principles of the Declaration of Independence, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness instilled in you, then that's a good thing. Right? And that's what Martin Luther King drew upon when he's saying, look, you wrote a check that came back insufficient funds, that all men are created equal. What about this? And this is good, but not what's being indoctrinated in Russia. In schools in France are required to display French and EU flags. In Russia, though, this push is paired with complete erasure of an opportunity to disagree. And that opportunity to disagree, look, hey, let me give you an example in the American context. Wait, if all men are created equal, why are we treating these people like that? Like, you should be able to push back against what's going on. Okay, so they should be able to say things like, hey, if Russia is a country that respects freedom and sovereignty of other countries, why are you doing this to Ukraine? But that won't be part of the picture. A law made it illegal to disseminate fake information. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Any remnants of a free press have been wiped out since the war started. Western publications and social media sites have been blocked online, and dissidents, independent journalists, and anyone speaking up against Putin's regime inside the country has been silenced. That's not helping things. A law made it illegal to disseminate fake information about the invasion. Almost 20,000 people have been detained for protesting against the war in Russia. Like, wrap that around your mind. That's something. We've seen many examples of teachers having to resign. There's a complete crackdown on freedom of speech, which means that there isn't a force in Russia that can counteract school propaganda. Okay, yesterday I talked about the Republicans and Democrats, and Republicans need Democrats and Democrats need Republicans. I know that sounds weird. As a Republican, I recognize that. I don't want Democratic values to prosper, or like the Democrat Party. I don't want their way to prosper because I'm a Republican. However, I know know that I need them, and they don't want Republican values and way Republicans, but they need to understand that they need Republicans, because the Democrats will keep a Republican honest, and the Republicans will keep a Democrat honest. So there's a self-righting mechanism by having the two parties watch each other that is completely lacking here. And so that analogy, I need you to import this into what we're talking about here. There's a complete crackdown on freedom of speech, which means that there isn't a force in Russia that can counteract school propaganda. So if this narrative is 100% correct, then you don't need anybody else. But if it's lacking in any way, then you need somebody from the other side of the other persuasion or the other perspective to say, no, that's not right. It's this. And that's how you get closer and closer to truth, right? But that's completely lacking here. And so you're going to run off the rails if you don't have opposition being able to speak truth to power. Okay, the state has everything on its side. It has money, it has bodies, it has the stick of being able to jail parents who oppose what's happening in schools. It has the stick of being able to keep teachers quiet. That's bad. That's not going to help them succeed long term. But what it will help them do is what they're hoping to do is to put this into mushy minds who will then be much more likely to enlist into the army in just a few years. This is a long-term investment in the policy on the part of the Kremlin. They care about younger generations, or at least the amenableness of younger generations, and how they see the state and how they will interact with it. And it's not just Russia. We know autocrats invest in education because they want to make sure that students are socialized in a way that aligns with what they want. That's exactly what's happening. Research done in China shows students exposed in new textbooks in China, they became more skeptical of the free market, for example, in economics, and they were more supportive of the government. So when they made small corrections in the textbooks, making the free market look bad, in China, students were more opposed to the free market and more looking toward the government. Okay, it works. Russia's effort to mobilize hundreds of thousands of citizens to fight in Ukraine last September caused chaos and anger and promoted large numbers of Russians to flee the border. Almost 1 million men, a huge brain drain. The government doesn't want that to happen again, and this is the way that they're going to prevent it from happening. So that's what's going on with these textbooks in Russia, and it's bad. This tells me, this also is a sign to me that Putin has no ambition to stop the war anytime soon. He wants to see a long war, and he's in it to win it. I'm convinced of that. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.